Okay, we are back. Right, Dal, I just want to touch on just the parties in general in the 90s, because it's a bit of a funny subject with you because you're on a whole different ball game now, a whole different level. You're playing some ridiculous parties with multiple tens of thousands of people at, literally week in, week out. And the parties we played, so we touched on it earlier. There's a big difference. You can't compare the two, really, can you?
It's difficult. It is difficult to compare because there's so many differences now.
Yeah, but back in those days, with the likes of Skelter at the Sanctuary, with Dreamscapes and Hardcore Heavens, Energy 97, which is one that we always bring up as being our favourite show. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think for me, I always think Skelter was the one. I mean, there was a few. Strangely enough, there was a few parties with some really cool promoters. Like Dave was an absolute legend. Loved Dave to bits and Penny, but Paul and Grant slamming. They were good friends.
Yeah.
Obviously, Seduction was doing Hardcore Heaven, so we got on really well with John. Dreamscape was a bit of a stranger one because I never really. When I first got booked for Dreamscape, which was 94, I think, I don't even think I met Murray. I think I had a phone call. And obviously, Murray passed away not too long after that. But then Dreamscape was owned by God knows how many different people. So there wasn't that same kind of connection, I think. I think Terry had it for a while, didn't he?
Also, I think we missed the wave of Dreamscape, didn't we? Well, I mean, I certainly did, because when I was listening to the tape packs before we'd even sort of made an impact, Dreamscape and Fantasia were they were the main ones. Yes. And then by the time we'd kind of started making an impact, Helter Skelter was
the main, and obviously Chris and United Dance,
Slamming Vinyl, they were the ones, weren't
I
they?
guess that was probably our local, really, wasn't it, being down at Stevenage, and still very much friends with Chris today.
Yeah.
But I still think, I guess, because Dave at Skelter he did a lot for us as well. And I see Dave not too long ago, it was at Charlie's wedding, funny enough. And we sat down having a drink and having a chat. And he actually said to me, he said, I remember when you boys were on once. He said, I was at the back of the arena. And he said, it was just going off. He said, I actually sat there and thought, it doesn't get any better than this. And coming from Dave, that's awesome. That's just an awesome thing. But we had so many. I mean, I think the one that everyone remembers or talks about, and they talk about still and have been recently, is the nightlife one where we did the 5 till 6, and Junior went on that rampage of a rap for like 90 seconds to 2 minutes, and that was insane.
No, well, didn't we? I mean, does my memory serve me correctly at this point?
Well, I doubt it very much.
But isn't that the night that we picked him up after he'd come out of prison?
I believe it was.
And we literally picked him up and he had his prison shirt on, his prison glasses.
Yep.
And then because his rap actually started that night with "Fresh out of jail, nobody can trouble this." That's how it starts.
Yeah. But he does a few different bits, but then he goes into that.
And it was over Braveheart, wasn't it?
And it was over Braveheart. Yeah.
That was a.
And it literally was fresh out of prison and stood on the stage and then did that. And I'd literally get messages about it all the time.
Yeah. I think another thing that was always really important, which just doesn't happen these days, is that, you know, the rave scene back then was split between hardcore and drum and bass, wasn't it, or jungle? And we would invariably, if we're playing at Helter Skelter, we would come on after a drum and bass DJ, and then a drum and bass DJ would come after us. Then it would be Dougal, and it was vice versa, wasn't it? In both arenas, Sanctuary and Rollers.
Yeah, they generally swap it around.
And that for me just gave you a different atmosphere, because I know that obviously the drum and bass guys, ravers, would go from room to room, as would the hardcore guys. But
Yep.
nevertheless, it was just something magical about it. Having this, I used to love walking. The nerves I used to feel when you'd walk in and you'd hear hype playing or something, and you'd feel the bass.
Yeah.
And then we'd come on and play a completely different style of music, but the energy levels would change, and then the same when they came back on after us. It was just a fabulous concoction of musical styles under one roof.
I think you just those names. I mean, for those names to be kind of still around now, people mention Skelter, and you get younger people to go, "What's it like? What's Skelter like?" Because I actually remember talking about Dreamscape as a raver going to Dreamscape. I can't remember which number it was. It would have been, because it'd been around for quite a bit longer. So it may have been 20, possibly. In 93, going there with Mick Francis, it was at the time, and just for a night out. And then not too much longer, just standing on that stage and playing. It was just, because we were standing there listening to Dave Angel and people like that. And
Yeah.
I suppose even now, the likes of Dave Angel is just a massive name.
Mm-hmm.
Still, but they would just, there was something special about that place, wasn't there?
Yeah,
and then obviously with Energy 97, all the talk of the scene having a bit of a turn and not doing what it's doing, and then to put Energy 97 on, and that was just utterly insane.
Yeah.
I mean, I never went to the Fantasia gigs, so Donington,
Yeah.
I never went to, and you look at that, and I can only imagine that it was probably on a par, I suspect,
I
with...
used to have a Fantasia jacket.
Yeah.
When I was at school, I felt like a right bad boy.
Still do. You get it out occasionally now.
Do you know what? I wish I still did have it.
I would. I can just imagine you rocking up to one of the parties now with your Fantasia jacket on.
Oh, God.
Loving that.
Yeah.
Just get one remade.
Yeah, should do.
What I also used to love though was kind of the regional stuff, because even though you had the Skelters and the Dreamscapes and the Hardcore Heavens, which kind of brought everyone from everywhere together, there was very definitive regional areas, like whether that be Manchester, Bowlers,
Bournemouth.
Bournemouth,
Yeah.
Birkenhead, the Drome, over the other side, Uprising and Donny Warehouse.
Yeah.
But all of those scenes were slightly different as well, weren't they? I mean, particularly Uprising and Donny.
Yeah.
So over Yorkshire way, it was quite heavily MC based, wasn't it? And you almost felt like that you was going to support the MC when
I think
that's up to those places.
More or less, that's pretty much what it was. They were like rock stars, weren't they? Those
Yeah.
guys. Like Nats was a huge superstar up
but
there,
even
wasn't
though
he?
they weren't particularly known outside of Yorkshire,
but in that area,
but within
they were
that area,
massive.
they were massive. Actually, funny. I talk about Nats.
Yeah.
Couple of funny stories. I saw something online yesterday of him in a picture with Carl Cox, which was. It's just ridiculous. I mean, God, Nats is well into his 60s now, I think. Isn't he? But
I don't think Carl Cox is far behind.
oh no, I don't think he is. But funny thing. I love Nats. He's just a ledge. And I was DJing at Sheffield. It was like back to the 90s thing a few years back, just after COVID. And I'd gone, and Stu Allen, God bless him, was playing before me, and Nats was emceeing for him. And Stu's come off, and I've gone on, and Nats has just looked over at me, give me a nod. I didn't have an MC. And Stu's got off. I've just got my first tune ready, and Nats has gone, yeah, can you welcome to the stage, Darren Styles? I was like,
No.
I'm like, Nats. No, I'm the older looking one. But bless him.
Brilliant.
So that was it's funny. But yeah, literally that whole Yorkshire scene, and then over the northwest side. But then, I mean, down in Cornwall, when we used to go down to the Shire Horse and places like that.
Yeah.
Again, completely different kettle of fish down there.
Yeah.
Just they did everything so differently, but that's what I used to love about playing those different areas. But particularly Scotland and Northern Ireland, which were just a whole different different thing. I mean, what's your favourite memories? Let's go with Scotland first of all. What's your favourite memories of Scotland?
Oh man, so many, because like you say, the crowd up there, and like you say in Northern Ireland, they're just on a different. It's a different vibe, isn't it? Even to this day, to be honest. But
yeah, I mean, I don't know whether it's to do with music. They're just more mental. They just literally proper go for it.
Yeah.
Or whether it's because the DJs went up there less often, and it was more of a big thing. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I mean, they had their own scene, obviously, with all the Scottish guys.
Well,
with the more
they had a
techno-based stuff.
massive scene, didn't they?
We had the likes of Basie G and Techno Trance, and obviously Mark Smith. And
Because I remember when we first went up there to Resurrection, and so it was our first experience of actually being at a gig like that with all of those homegrown acts, Ultrasonic, I think David Forbes, Scott Brown, obviously.
yeah.
All those guys. And bear in mind what we were making at the time, we at that point we still had quite a lot of breakbeats in our tunes.
Yeah.
So we had a kick in there, but it wasn't as heavy as the kicks that these guys were using.
Are you talking as the Force and Evolution stuff? Or
This was Force and Evolution, yeah. So
yeah.
beforehand. And I remember thinking, I'm not sure if this is going to go down very well because our music is a lot softer.
Yeah.
And in fairness, it didn't go down as well as their stuff, but it was still really well received. So even from the get-go, it was kind of like, yeah, you could feel that something was going to bubble.
What I used to find funny though was, I mean, my favourite club in Scotland was Foo Bar.
Yeah.
I mean, Foo Bar, for anyone that doesn't know, was in Stirling.
I think it's still there.
Is it still there, is it?
Yeah, yeah.
I used to love that place. And we used to do a lot of M8 nights there, didn't we?
Yeah.
Wasn't it run by the M8 guys at the time? I can't remember.
Pretty sure it was.
It was, yeah. But they used to have some funny little things going on, like you'd be DJing and then you'd be getting hit with light sticks. It's like, what the hell is going on? But then someone would go, oh, it's a sign of respect.
Yeah.
It don't fucking feel like it.
Yeah.
But the atmosphere in those places, we had some great times up there with, God, do you remember the one where a whole bunch of us had gone up on the train? Did you come on that one? There was Slam and there was Bunter and there was, I think Matrix was up there for that one. No, you don't remember that.
I don't remember that.
No,
I don't
maybe you
remember the
wasn't
train.
there. You might not have been at that one.
No.
That was, but going up by train was just a different experience altogether. But the resis at Royal Highland Centre was always, it was just big. Wasn't it? It was just,
It was vast.
it was ridiculous size. And we was talking about the PA with Colin earlier. I mean, Colin was just kind of running around that stage like he was some Olympic athlete with
Yeah.
his guitar doing knee slides.
Yeah.
So it was like he was Slayer.
His knee sliding on the Saturday and fixing washing machines on the
Fixing
Sunday.
washing machines on the
Absolutely
Sunday.
living it though, isn't he?
So Scotland's always had a real kind of love Scotland anyway, but Ireland as well. Now Ireland was a whole different kettle of fish, not only in respect of the political stuff that was going over there at the time, and us being so young,
Not really knowing much about
not really
it.
understanding any of it. And what was really strange is that we'd get booked over there for a couple of gigs, and one would be a Protestant gig and one would be a Catholic gig, and we're like, it's two clubs, isn't it? It's like we have no idea, and we'd have to be dropped off on a street corner by one promoter and picked up by another one. You remember that? We went to a record signing at a shop, and we literally dropped off at a street corner, and then someone else would have to come and meet us
Yeah.
because it wasn't safe for the other people to be in the area and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
It was mind blowing.
It was.
But that side, but later on, as time went on and things become politically better over there, my favourite club become the Coach, which Lee was doing all the bookings for. The atmosphere in that place was, I don't think I've seen an atmosphere in a club like that ever. And remember when, do you remember when the Ultra Beat Boys come over?
Yes.
And so I think Scott Brown was there that night as well, wasn't he? And Scott was on, and I think Junior would have been with us as well at the time. And you get to the end of the night there, and this would have probably been on a bank holiday Sunday, I think. and it's like a 1 o'clock finish, and you told to finish dead on 1 o'clock, and the crowd at 1:20 are still there chanting.
Yeah. Lights are on.
The lights are on. They are not going anywhere until you play another track. And if literally you could be there for 20 minutes and the club will go, oh, go on then. Then you put another one on. It was completely off the hook, that place. I just loved. I mean, do you remember Kilwater House?
Of course.
So Kilwater House, a lot of the back in those days in the
And
mid-90s,
that is where we used to stay. Wasn't the hotel there?
Well, yeah, the hotel and the club was in the same complex.
Yeah.
But that was just right out in the countryside, just outside Belfast, I think it is. And of course, it's not a great combination having the club and the hotel in the same place, because it's so easy just to have a few too many buckfasts and then fall into bed or a coma, whichever.
Or in your case, fall into the decks.
Fall in, yes. Oh, okay, so we want to go there, do we?
Yeah, we might as well, mightn't we?
Okay, now we're there. So Kilwater House was the venue that we used to play for Eddie there, I think, didn't we?
Yeah.
And so the hotel and the club was all one complex, as a lot of places were in Ireland at that time. And beloved DJ Tizer would like to get me on the Buckfast. And I think everyone was it a United dance?
Everyone was there. Yeah.
Everyone was there. Like
Yeah,
Chris was there, Slipmat was there,
Yeah.
all the boys were there.
Yeah.
And we'd started on the Buckfast quite early.
I'm pretty sure we were closing, weren't we? We were doing the last set. I think we were on last, weren't we?
No. See, I remember that bit. I think, well,
But we were on quite late because
I
you'd
have
already.
no idea.
Yeah,
No.
that's what I mean. You were already blazing before we'd even
but
started.
we'd get there at like 1 PM, and we'd be drinking from 1 PM until we go on. But I mean, I can't remember I thought it was a fairly early set, honestly. But then again, where we're going with this story, you probably realise that I have no idea what time it was.
I mean, the fact of I think bottom line is we started playing, didn't we? And I think 2 records in, I felt a little bit of I felt like a bump or something had gone on. I turned around and
I think the way
your legs are in the air.
You've told the story before is that I was a little bit inebriated, and you were slightly concerned about my possible upcoming performance on the said turntables, and that you was quite impressed that I'd managed to get the first mix in.
Yeah.
But at that point, that's where it all started to go a little
It went
bit
pear-shaped.
belly up.
Yeah.
And
Literally.
kind of culminated in me being flat on my back behind the decks, and never to look at another record that night again, I think.
Yeah.
However,
it ended up being a solo set, didn't it? I think.
it ended up being a solo set, and I probably still owe you a few quid for that. To be honest with you. But when it gets where it gets better, that night didn't kind of end there, because I think wasn't everyone trying to find me, or was it prior to the set they were trying to find me? Because I'd gone walkabouts.
I think this was after.
It was after, was it? And I think Slipmat, bless him, was trying to look for me. I don't know if you were playing at the time, and I was taking a break, but they did find me, and I was at the front of the club having a one-arm press-up competition against a doorman. Do you recall that?
I mean, I remember the story, but I think I was deep in the mix at that
You
point.
were deep in the mix. Well, I was just getting some exercise.
Yeah.
Just showing these Irish boys how it should be done, one-arm press-ups. But that's what Ireland was like, and it was always messy in Ireland,
yeah.
because the Buckfast would come out, and Buckfast is just lethal, and when you're not used to drinking it would send you over the edge, quite literally,
With the Southern Softies.
So, yeah, but I as I say, Ireland and Scotland were just a mental level notched up 1 or 2, and still is. As far as I mean, when we last did Ireland a couple of years back together, didn't we? But we haven't done a club over there, and I think particularly the club events are really red hot.
Yeah,
and Scotland. Again, you're up there all the time in Scotland, aren't you?
They've just got so much energy, and they're just always up for it.
Always pleased to see you.
Always pleased to
Always
see
pleased
you.
to see
Whoever's playing there, it just seems like they've always got the energy for them,
Yeah.
you know.
But one of the other things I did want to mention, because I think it deserves a bit of a mention because he did a lot for us, was Dance Paradise.
Oh yeah,
Alex at Dance Paradise was, and the thing is about Dance Paradise, it was one of those kind of East Anglian gigs. There's not many of them, and it was always a legendary gig, and we got on really well with Al, and he used to book us as Force and Evolution, so we did a lot of PAs for them, DJ for them, and then that continued through the Force and Styles days, and it was all, and as you know, come down to your birthday on your 20th birthday as well, all the way down from Yarmouth. So I think, you know, it's another party that we really enjoyed doing, and I haven't seen him for a couple of years actually. He's still about, still being Al. He's a good old boy, but yeah, that's really it. Have you got any other things you want to talk about party wise, or anything that you kind of think you miss more than anything? That's...
What was, you know, the Helter Skelter one we were talking about, the one or the one that I think was a real turning point, but it wasn't at Sanctuary. It was that Energy 97 or was that Energy 96? The one, it was outdoors. It was
Energy 97 was outdoors.
That was the one.
Yeah.
Excuse me. See, that one there is, I feel like that one was a big turning point for us, because that was the first time I feel like we played and really realised that people were there to see us, because even though the tent was rammed, the outside of the tent, you know, with people trying to get in, whereas you're up there on the decks and you can physically see people trying to get in. There was literally, it almost looked like there was as many people outside the tent as there was inside the tent. And it was one of those ones where suddenly you realise, wow, they know the words to absolutely every tune we're playing. So that one, I remember coming off feeling like
it's the one, if anyone asks what's your favourite gig, you don't even have to think about it. It's Energy 97.
Yeah, for loads of reasons. You know, the reason of the fact that it was just, it was like the stars aligned that night, because the atmosphere was fabulous, the set time was fabulous, whoever we were playing before and after, it worked. And yeah, that was one of those pivotal nights, I would say.
I think did we come on after Fantasy or someone like that? It was drum and bass anyway, wasn't it, I think?
Yeah.
And then maybe Hype was on after us, or it was just in between two drum and bass guys. There's only one downside about that night, not taking anything away from Charlie, but Junior wasn't with us that night because he was having a small break.
Yeah. He's having another sabbatical.
But Charlie stepped in and actually did the job that Charlie does. And if anyone listens, finds that tape online, the thing you'll notice is you can't hear most of the tracks we're playing
because
the noise from the whistles and the horns is just constant.
Yeah.
It's almost like, you remember that World Cup in South Africa with the Vuvuzela Sailor?
Yeah.
It's almost like that. You can't hear anything that's happening. It's just noise of horns and whistles. But all good memories. So something I really wanted to touch on, because I think we should, because it wasn't all good times.
No.
It's a high percentage of good times, which is always nice. If you're over 50%, you're winning. It's all good. But we did have a period. I think we said that the last big thing that we really did was Cutting Deep.
Yeah.
After that, we had a real struggle.
Yeah. We lost our way, didn't we?
We lost our way. And funnily enough, one of the things I've got written down here, have you been looking at my book?
No.
Losing Direction.
There you go.
There you go. Hey, great minds and all that.
You put it a little bit more eloquently, didn't you?
Lost our way. But whichever way you want to look at it, it was around that time. And I think we was fighting with, there's a number of things going on.
I don't think we were alone, by the way, because at that point, things were changing around us musically. But we definitely...
I think there was a perfect storm of about a million things happening at the same time. So one of them was people were getting to a stage where they're thinking, oh, things have got to change a bit, because same formula for a number of years, things have got to change. When in fact, in hindsight, you look back and go, oh, do you know what? It hadn't been going for a few years. It probably didn't need to change at the time. Changing equipment, because there was that big change over to digital equipment. And as we discussed earlier with the analog stuff, and, you know, all right, digital was better for saving your mixes and all that kind of thing. There's a lot of bits and pieces that you did lose, like just the natural distortion of a gain up to 11. So there's that. There's new synths coming out constantly. There was the whole trance scene going on at that time.
That was a huge thing.
And we was kind of getting lost a little bit in that. We was having stuff signed to Neo Records, doing some bits with Neo, trying to nail that sound. We also moved studios at the same time over to your dad's, away from the Enterprise Centre. And going from a place that had carpet on all the walls to a room that had nothing on the walls apart from a little bit of acoustic treatment,
Yeah.
which was just some panels
Yeah,
that we
so
put
it's
up.
like learning the room all over again
And
with
we-
a different sound, with new equipment. And also, I think there's a lot to be said about the fact that when we had our sort of time with Pinnacle, Diverse, and then obviously, say, trying to sort of do some stuff with Neo, one of the biggest things is that what we didn't realise, if you now look back on it, it's what you touched on earlier, is that when we were making music for the dance floor, is when it was working.
Yep.
So when we had the dance floor in mind, what we hoped would work, what we felt would work if we was on the dance floor, and then suddenly we were in that point where we were making records for record companies that were hoping to take things in a different direction. So we're making things more for radio and to be
Yep.
listened to, and forgetting actually that a successful record generally doesn't happen that way with a dance record. It happens because it's come organically from the floor.
Yeah, agreed.
And there was that as well, which is a big thing.
But the funny thing was, we used to. It's mad looking back at it. Certain tracks we didn't make for the dance floor necessarily. We kind of made to listen to. So Apollo 13,
Yeah.
for instance.
But it still had that heavy kick.
But it still had the heavy kick. So you still had that
had all the
element to
elements
it.
we were still using.
Now, there was a couple of remixes we did, which was the Johnny L Hurt You So remix. There was the Sharky one,
Products of Society.
Product of Society, which I both of those to listen to, the actual music in it, it's beautiful. But you couldn't play them out
No,
because
didn't connect.
Because we stopped using that kick to get away from that kick. And the minute we lost that kick, and we weren't using offbeat stabs.
No, we were trying to bring bass into it.
We're trying to bring bass into it, and we couldn't get the mix right, and nothing sounded right, and everything sounded weak and horrid. And funnily enough, that's why on this box set, I'm quite happy to say it, you won't find any of those tracks because I just don't like any of them.
Yeah, well, they just didn't work, did they?
It's just nothing worked. And when I was going through the DATs, putting everything together for the box set, all of those old tracks, you listen to them and the elements of the music are great. They'd fit into anything. And then you just got this really weak kick and really weak bass.
Yeah.
And it just
But again,
grinds me.
we were, we had this trance thing that was blowing up everywhere around us, which wasn't there before. And we were heavily influenced without we probably did know it because we knew we loved
trance.
We loved trance. We were playing it at Sunday service.
Loved
but
it.
we were trying to make that, but at faster speed. What we should have done in hindsight is if we'd have added those elements of the trance, but with the heavier kicks we were using and kept the raw elements to it, we would have been onto something a bit sooner.
Do you know what? Funnily enough, I used to have moments, maybe when you weren't in the studio, when I'd kind of swap a bass sound over and put a stab back in. And you just go, oh yeah, that sounds so much better.
Yeah.
Oh, but it's not what we're doing now.
Yeah.
And now I look back and kick myself going, what are you thinking?
Yeah.
It sounded good. That's what you should stick with.
Yeah.
And I think you can just get taken down dark alleyways trying to please people or do
100%.
things that...
Yeah, it's it's something that it's something that still goes on, I think, with every producer.
Yeah, of course it is.
It
just comes with time. And like you said it earlier, your first thoughts is dance floor. And I think it's taken probably a lot of experience. I find what's quite funny actually is I think about this a lot over the time. That period when looking at the DATs, we were still making stuff in 2001. And then in 2003, obviously you was working on the stuff with Breezy. And it took 2 years to develop a sound, I guess.
Yeah.
Which was for the dance floor again.
Yeah.
Because there must have been a couple of years of nothing really happening. Almost. I mean, I don't know.
I mean, we were still doing certain gigs, but
we're still DJing.
Yeah.
But actual production wise,
yeah.
Because I know you was working on. I was working with Craig at the time, wasn't I?
Yeah.
And probably spending far too much time on the golf course, but I was working with Craig, and then you was working with Breezy. When I say Craig, I talk with Craig as in audiovisual Craig, and Honest Day's Work and all that kind of stuff. And then you was working with Breezy, and then eventually you kind of started all the new sound, the Raver Baby sound, I guess you'd call it, where there's punch back in the tracks.
Yeah, I think essentially it's what I said before. It was the trance influenced musical side of it, but the bottom end of the track was essentially heavier kicks again and the right kind of basses.
Yeah.
It can be so difficult because the foundations of the track, as we know, it's just so important, and the kick drum itself in any genre of music, whatever genre you're doing, is so important to the actual record, and we didn't quite realise that at the time.
No.
By taking out that kick, we didn't have anything to replace it with, and it just didn't seem to work. But yeah, when I hooked up with Breezy, we kind of got that. We managed to get the formula.
Yeah, exactly, and it kind of falls into place. And I guess early days we was just lucky enough that everyone was using the heavier kick.
Yeah,
and it just kind of fell into place, and we didn't have to think about it. Sometimes I guess you just start to overthink it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah,
and that, I mean, it pains me sometimes to listen to some of the stuff that we do. I mean, the worst one, which is such a pity because it could have been such a good record, is Look at Me Now.
Yeah,
because that junior vocal, although it sounds bloody awful on the track, and God knows how we put that track out, because if you listen to it, it's really bad, and that's why it never gets any mentions anywhere.
Yeah.
I don't know how we actually sat there and went, yeah, that's right to put out.
Yeah. I think we were just clutching at straws at that time.
We were. I think we just couldn't tell what sounded good because, that room just didn't work for us.
The funny thing is, what makes it obvious, and it's a lot clearer to me, especially these days, is that if I play something out in my set and it just doesn't connect, even on first or second play, I generally know if I've got something.
Yeah.
Which is no different to when we first played Heart of Gold and first played Pretty Green Eyes.
Yeah.
We knew straight away because you can just see something on the dance floor. When and if we played those records out, why didn't we sort of think when we were playing them along? Because it was in the era of Scott Brown, Elysium, and those kind of records. Why we didn't just play it against tracks like that and think this just ain't good enough?
Yeah. Just don't think at the time. You just kind of lost down a wormhole.
Yeah.
And it is literally like that. You just kind of, I don't know.
No.
But in hindsight, I mean, the other thing as well, which gets a lot of mentions, is that the meeting of minds down at Slamming Vinyl.
Yeah.
When everyone got together, and we was really determined because I think, as much as anyone else, there's some people, certainly Brisky didn't want to change to slow it down because for obvious reasons, he was a faster DJ. And we'd all gone away going, we'll give this a go. And I think we made like 4 or 5 155 BPM tracks. And even though the content of the tracks were pretty decent, they wouldn't have worked on a dance floor because the kick and the bass were too weak. But that as well was taking us down a kind of avenue where we was just concentrating so hard on that. And it wasn't like, going back to what we said earlier, it wasn't like we was knocking out 5 tracks a day and we'd go, okay,
there was a lot of blood, sweat and tears on the tunes.
If people knew the pain that we went through.
Yeah.
And I think for me, because I find it difficult with those kind of situations, if things 95 to 98, 99, where everything, you said it earlier yourself, everything we did turned to gold. And it was easy in that respect because, let's get the next one up. But flip that over and everything you do just sounds shit.
Yeah, it's tough.
Demoralising.
It is very, very tough. But, we were in a period where the foundations of every track we made was already there. So, for example, we had the kick sound, right? So we didn't need to worry about the kick. We had the stabs that we used. We had the hats we used all the time, which was off the Roland DR660. All the foundations of that side of it were there. So we didn't have to sit there pulling our hair out thinking, what kick should we use? And this bass is going to work. We knew that side of it worked. So we could literally just be creative with the top end of the track, which was the music and the vocal and the melodies.
Yep.
So we weren't bogged down with all the aspects of the production side of it which we later were, because we were trying to think, is this kick any good? Does this one work?
Get it.
Auditioning every single sample in the world. And none of them actually work. But the ones we left behind would have been absolutely fine.
I just remember sometimes just turning up to the studio and just spend an hour just having done the same thing all day the day before and then you just like listening to sounds and like, I
know.
can't do this.
I remember it well.
I can't do it. And then you just have to go, right, let's just leave it, and then we come back. And I think obviously that was a point where I'd kind of, my head was gone at that point, and I'd had enough.
Yeah.
But look, things happen. You learn by your mistakes, and you kind of move on. But let's move on to more positive things, shall we? Because we don't want to talk about those couple of horrible years. Rubbish. 2003, well, just before 2003, which was a good year for you guys because obviously you'd got that Rave Baby sound going on. But then all around the world started to pick up on the older stuff. And what's really odd now is we're talking with the box set coming out 30 years on, basically since we started Force and Styles. This was only 6 years on from when we'd had those tracks, 6 or 7 years on.
Which at that time felt quite a while ago.
Well, considering if we was playing gigs, and this was really odd as well. So if we was doing a Force and Styles back to back, which we still did a lot of at the time, you'd be playing off a CD. I'd play off a vinyl because I hadn't got into the whole CD thing. I couldn't even look back now, but and so that was just kind of a really odd dynamic.
Yeah.
It was kind of like we're doing it together, but we're not doing it together.
Yeah.
And it was a really weird time. But it kind of felt like it was still called old school at the time because you got this new sound.
Yeah.
We was playing old school, and 20 years later, it's still old school. And, but was Heart Gold was the first one, was it?
Heart Gold was the first one.
Heart Gold was the first
with
one
Kelly.
with Kelly, which they released all around the world and charted at 19, I believe. So it done a lot better than it had done
previously.
With Pinnacle, which was only, I guess, 4 or 5 years before. So it got its second release. Obviously did really well, but when everything changed was clearly when Ultra Beat did Pretty Green Eyes.
Yep.
And the build up to that was pretty insane, really, wasn't it? We had, even locally, do you remember the newspaper interviews that we had and pictures by down the pier about it all going off? But in that build up to it to release, all the stuff on the radio, everything on the radio featured Pretty Green Eyes.
Yeah.
It was mad, wasn't it?
Yeah, Top of the Pops.
Top of the Pops. Well, I'm trying to think when we did that. Do you remember, obviously, the day that it was charting, we got a phone call, didn't we, in the morning to tell us where it was. Whether it was, we knew it was around about number 2, but we didn't know whether it was going to get number 1 or not. And we got the call in the morning just to let us know that it is number 2.
Yeah.
Blue Cantrell and Sean Paul have nabbed the number 1 spot. And we was going to the pub in Frinton, weren't we, with all the guys to listen to the top 40 countdown. We took a stereo in there with us, and we knew it was number 2, and no one else. We didn't tell anyone else, did we? But that was nice to kind of share that with everyone at the time.
Yeah, it was a great night.
But it was. I mean, how did you feel with? I mean, I'm still annoyed at Blue Cantrell and Sean Paul, to be honest with you, because apparently if the track had been released a week either side, it would be number 1.
No way.
It was only, because it was only that week working on the numbers of the sales. It was only that week where it ended up as being number 2.
I just remember, well, shed a tear, didn't we, that night when we were down there? But I think it was just an emotional time because a record that we'd written 6 years previous, which had done so well in a completely different scene, in a different world, suddenly comes back to life by Mike, Chris and Ian, and suddenly we find ourselves in a completely different environment again.
It almost gives you kind of validation that you were doing something right.
Yeah.
Having been through that couple of years of real crap time, just going, do you know what? If it carried on doing what we was doing, we'd probably have another dozen of these. Or the length of time it took us to make anything, maybe 2. But it was awesome. And you mentioned about going to Top of the Pops, because the great thing about All Around the World, and you've worked with them lots over the years now anyway, But Matt and Chris were lovely guys, and they'd get us involved in everything.
They were so inclusive, weren't they? They
didn't have to.
No,
they were just doing a cover at the end of the day, and they didn't have to include us at all, but they did.
But I'll never forget that night. Because I don't know about you, I don't know if you'd met them before, but that was the first time I'd actually physically met Mike, Chris and Ian.
I believe it's the first time I've met them as well.
Never met them before. And then Mick just goes up there and just sings it live.
Yeah.
Twice, because obviously they have to get a couple of cuts, and just sang it perfectly both times. Just like this.
It was. Do you remember who was presenting that day?
Edith Bowman.
And
there was someone else, wasn't there? Go on.
Jack Osborne.
Oh, it was Jack Osborne. It was.
Yeah, because do you remember we stood out the back and Jack came out and he stood right next to me. I think the show was just finished. And I said, Jack, we're all going out now. Do you fancy coming out for a drink? He just looked at me and said, who the hell are you?
Yeah. No, I do remember that as well.
But what was funny is I think they'd put us in a hotel down Park Lane, hadn't they?
Yeah.
And where were the boys staying? Can't remember. They weren't staying in Park Lane.
They were in a different one, weren't they?
Yeah, they were in a different hotel.
Yeah,
but we'd gone to their hotel, and the label had given us a load of money to spend, and we just got a big bottle of Bollinger or something like that. And spent God knows.
What I do remember is on the way home, as we invariably did, I had to pull over for either you or Junior to throw up outside the car. Was it? It was Junior this time, was it?
Yeah, I managed to hold it until I got home.
Yeah. That was a standard result
Junior,
of a night
bless
out.
him. He wasn't particularly well on the way home, was he?
No.
But legendary as ever. But I mean, obviously after that, we had Field of Dreams was done. When me and Junior actually, I'm sure you know, started working with Flip and Phil quite a bit after that, and we was writing with them. So we'd go up there. I think we was going up for the party more than anything. So Mark and Gray had a studio in Earlham near Manchester, and we'd go to the studio on the Thursday. But they'd always say, come on the Thursday, because Graham would be DJing at the club in Bolton, which was called Jack's, I think. And so Alan Shatlady and all those people are. And we'd just have a just crazy time up there. Not a lot got done in the studio the next day because it was just a little bit lively on a Thursday night. But I do remember on one occasion, me and Jay were in the hotel, we got ready, we got in the lift, and we was going down to meet Mark and Graham at the club. And as we're coming down the lift, we just had this cuckoo. And like the lift stopped. It's like, oh, great. And we were stuck between the third and fourth floor or something like that. And was there for a few minutes and nothing happened. But picked up the phone in the lift and dialed the number. And someone's picked up and said, hey, we're kind of stuck in the lift. Whereabouts are you stuck? I was, well, in the lift. No, the floor. What floors are you on? I said, it's between 3 and 4, I think. So anyway, I said, okay, we'll try and get something sorted. They didn't say anything else. We was in there for about 30 minutes, right? And it's getting pretty hot. It's a small lift, me and Jay. And luckily there's no one else in there. And we could hear some kind of rattling about and some knocking. And we could hear a voice going, right, we're nearly there. I'm like, what the hell is going on? And then suddenly these doors have come open and there's 4 firemen stood there with axes.
No way. This is a new one on me.
Yeah, you've not heard this story?
No.
There's literally 4 firemen. Right? It's the only time I've ever been rescued by a fireman. Sharky would have been lovely. He'd have been loving it if he was. And there was a manager stood there with 2 pints of beer because he said to me on the phone, he says, anything, when we get you out, is there anything you boys want? I said, a couple of pints would be lovely. So he's actually stood outside the lift with 2 pints. But that was Bolton for you.
Brilliant.
Loved Bolton. So we had some great times with the All Around the World guys. And I mean, you've had far more experiences with them and successes, obviously, because you've had a bunch of stuff through All Around the World now, and the albums and everything else.
Yeah, they released the solo album as well. So still work with them to this day.
There you go. It's all good.
Top lads.
Do you remember?